For today, we're going to be talking about a new concept, which is called completing the square. And this is very useful in solving different equations that include quadratics, which we'll get to in a little bit later. But today, we're going to be looking at doing completing the square in order to go from standard form, which we'll cover. We're going to go from standard form and then go to vertex form. Once we do that, near the end here, then we will also practice graphing it, and we'll do this by hand. We're going to graph the equation once we go from standard to vertex form. All right, so again, to use this new method here, this called completing the square, it's very useful for us to go from standard form to vertex form. So it's one method to go from standard to vertex form. And then we'll talk about what those forms are down below here. It's also very useful in doing something like this whenever you can't do factoring. You can kind of force something to be factorable, which you'll see whenever we do some of the problems below. So let's talk about what standard form is. Standard form, if you remember, looks like this. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. We should be very familiar with what this looks like. We've dealt with this multiple times before. So when it looks like this, it's called standard form. So we're going to start with a problem like this, and we're going to change it to vertex form. So what is that? This one we haven't done for a little while, but we have done it. This looks like this. Y equals a times x minus h, the quantity of that, squared, plus k. So we're going to figure out how do we start with this standard form, and we're going to convert to vertex form. Because once we do that, then it's really easy for us to graph. I don't know if you remember, but between these two numbers here that you get, hk, that was your vertex. Thus why they call this the vertex form. So we'll be able to extract that, the vertex, and then be able to graph it. We'll use a table and then plot the points. So how do we go from this step, standard form to vertex form? We're going to use this method, these steps here, and part of it is going to be called completing the square. And I think that's step 2 is really what you're doing, completing the square. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to add or subtract, depending on what you have, c to both sides of the equation. So I'm literally going to move through c to the other side. In this case, you'd be doing it by subtraction. So remove that to the other side. And then you're going to do a little bit, kind of a weird thing here. You're going to take the b value, the one that's in front of the x here, and we're going to divide it by 2, and then we'll square it. So this will end up being just a number, say like 10, and then we're going to add that to both sides of the equation. Then the third step, once we do this step here, which is called completing the square, it's really where it comes from, this will allow us to then factor. Once we factor, it's going to look kind of like this x minus h squared. And then all we have to do is simplify a little bit, because we'll have a number over here that we have to bring back over and make k. So then we'll simplify into vertex form. So really it's these 4 steps. But first, before we go through all 4 of these steps, we're going to practice just these 2, and then we'll do all 4 of them. So we're going to give an example where we do this part here, the b over 2 squared, and factoring. So let's try that first. For example 1, what should be added to complete the square for the following examples, and then we will factor. So how do we do this? There's a blank spot here that we're going to put a number. Where do we get that number from? We're going to take our b value, which is 6. Go off to the side here. It's like some side work. We do 6 divided by 2, and then square it. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Squared is 9. So this is the number that we put here. We're going to add 9. Now, when we have an equation, we'll have to do it to both sides. But right now, we just put it here. So in doing this, now we actually have a shortcut method, and this should factor very nicely. So I'm just going to go ahead and factor it. We have 2 sets of parentheses. We're multiplying to get 9, adding to get 6. Right? 9 and 6. And this turns out to be very nice of 3 and 3 for both of them. And so that would mean when you factor, you get x plus 3 and another x plus 3. So that one's factored. All right, move on to part B. Label this one as B again. So we have -4 we're going to be using. That's okay. We do -4 over 2 and then square it. If we divide that by 2, we get -2. And then we square it to get, be careful here, this actually becomes a +4. Not a -4, it's +4. It's a -2 times -2. All right, and then let's see, we're multiplying to get 4, adding to get -4. Well, one way to get 4 would be 4 and 1 or 2 and 2. But how are we going to make that negative? They may both have to be negative. So if we did x minus 2 and another x minus 2, that would add to -4. And if you multiplied them, you got 4, +4. All right, part C. There's your b value. We're going to use -10 now. Divide by 2. If this would work, that'd be great. And then square it. -10 divided by 2 is -5. Don't forget to have the parentheses there. That's pretty important. That's how you get this positive number every time. And when you square -5, you get 25. We'll throw that in there. So let's factor this. So how do you get 25 and add to -10? That would be 5 times 5. But again, they both have to be negative. So before we move on to the last one here, I want you to be able to look and see if there's a pattern, what's going on here with all these answers. I don't know if you noticed, but every single time they have the same number in each set. So -2, -2, -5, -5, and 3 and 3. So it always ends up being the exact same thing. And also, the answers that you get every time when you factor always comes from dividing the middle number by 2. So when we go over here and we divide it by 2, we got 3, that's what ends up being down here, right? You can highlight that. Say when we got 3 here, you get 3 and 3. Same with the next one. When we took -4 and divided by 2, -2 shows up as your answer each time. And we can do it again when I got -5. So as soon as you divide by 2, you already know the factored form. The only part we actually need to fill in the blank is the squaring part. So once you square it and get 25, that's how you plug that in. So if you can recognize that that's kind of like a little shortcut, you don't actually have to try and factor this. So when we go to something harder like part D, I don't know if you noticed, but 7 is not going to be a nice number to use. If we go off the side and divide by 2, yeah, that's going to be a decimal. So if you divide it by 2, you would get 3.5. Maybe I'll leave this as a fraction instead. Dividing that by 2 gives you 3.5. So instead I'll leave it as a fraction and just square it, which means you have to square the top and the bottom, which becomes 49 over 4. And we'll add that in here. But you should already know the answer. I couldn't imagine trying to factor this. This is a mess. You got a decimal here, you got a whole number here. So the answer would be, if you want to use this as a fraction, as soon as you divide by 2, which we did right here, but nothing changed, it'd be 7 over 2 and another 7 over 2. Or if you want to use decimals, that would be 3.5, right? You could put 3.5 in there. But that should work. If you do 7 over 2 plus 7 over 2, that gives you 14 over 2, which is 7. If you multiply them together, you would do 7 times 7, 49. 2 times 2 is 4. So that multiplies that and adds 7. So it does work. Okay, now since we're done with those 2 steps, we did these 2 here. Now we're going to go ahead and include all 4. We're going to do 1 through 4. So the first thing we're going to do, now that we have an equation, it's going to look like one of these. We're going to subtract c to both sides. So this one says, convert the following equations from standard form to vertex form using the completing the square. Okay, so we're going to add 4 to both sides. So we have y plus 4 equals x squared plus 8x. So the whole reason of doing that is to kind of get rid of this number we don't want anything over here. We kind of want this blank spot, so I'm going to add a little blank spot here. However, we also have to add a blank spot on this side, because if you add a number to one side of the equation, you have to do it to both sides of the equation. And so when we go off to the side here and get a number, we're going to put it on both sides of the equation now. So then we're going to go to step 2, which is we're going to add b over 2 squared to both sides to balance the equation. So our b value is 8, so go off the side and do that. I don't know what I just did there. Here we go, 8. Divide by 2 and square it. That's 4 squared, or 16. Add 16 here and over here. So that's called completing the square. We almost had something that could be factorable. We just need a number over here. And so every time you do this, you're making this a perfect square, essentially, right? What you're saying is what multiplies to 16 adds to 8? It's always going to be the same number, 4 and 4 in this case. On the left-hand side, we'll just simplify this, 16 and 4. So we have y plus 20. On the right-hand side, you can factor, or you can use a shortcut and say, oh, yeah, when you divide by 2, the answer is going to be 4. So you have x plus 4 and another x plus 4. And the last thing we have to do, since we got done factoring, now we're going to simplify it into vertex form so it looks like this here. So how do we do that? How do we get this squared here? And how do we get this number out here? And we're not going to have an a value this time. There's nothing out front. If you look at this, there's nothing out front here. However, if you see that there's two x plus 4s, we can condense that into one set and square it. And at the same time, we have this y plus 20. We should get y by itself. I'm also going to subtract 20 to move it back over to the right-hand side. So that's going to make it go down here. And that would be your final answer. So we condense them together, get x plus 4 quantity squared, and minus 20. So there's your answer. Now it's in vertex form. And if I were to ask you what the vertex is, you should be able to tell me what that is, even though you may not remember. It's supposed to be the opposite sign of this one. So the vertex would be -4, and then this number here is -20. Now you may not remember this. Hopefully it kind of jogs your memory, but we're going to need to use that when we start graphing. All right, part B. I'm going to go through this a little bit faster now, but I'm going to go through the exact same steps as the first one. And let's change color. So I'm going to subtract c, in this case, is 3. So you get y minus 3 equals x squared minus 14x. Now we have this random spot here that we have to add a blank spot on each side. We'll go off the side and divide by 2, square it. That's -7 squared, and that's going to give you a positive 49. I don't know why this is getting tilted here, but it's plus 49. Same thing on this side. All right, then we'll combine the left-hand side. We have y plus 49 minus 3 is 46. Factor this, right? This whole thing gets factored. That becomes x minus 7 and another x minus 7. It's going to happen the same every time. Multiply them together, you get 49. Add, you get -14. Or you can look at the fact that we had -7 right there. Same thing. All right, then I'm going to subtract 46 to both sides. Just put that on the end here and condense those two. So y equals x minus 7 squared minus 46. There's your answer. So we're going to do a couple more, and then there's also a huddle involved here, and then we'll do some graphing. Okay. So 2 more here. Go a little bit faster. I'm going to subtract 6. So y minus 6 equals x squared plus 2x. We'll leave our blank spot here. We're going to take 2 and divide it by 2 and square it. So that's 1 squared, or 1. So we're just adding 1 to both sides. All right, let's factor this one here. What is going on here? Where's my mouse? Here we go. If we factor this side, we get x. What multiplies to 1 and adds to 2? It's got to be 1 and 1. So x plus 1, another x plus 1. You don't have to write this step out every time. You can condense it right now if you want. And then 1 minus 6 is a -5. So I'm going to add over the 5 and then condense those two. So my final answer is x plus 1 squared plus 5. There it is. All right, last one. Minus 40. Well, last one until we do some graphing. Minus 43 on both sides, you get y minus 43. That equals x squared plus 20x. Leave blank spots in here. Go off to the side, we divide by 2 and square. Looks a little ugly there. There we go. So that would be 10 squared. Ooh, I'm going to get 100. So we're going to add 100 to both sides. 100 minus 43, that's going to be 57, positive. And then we factor this. What multiplies 100 and adds a 20? That would be 10 and 10. So there's two of those. So this is the time where I'm just going to do it all at once. I condense it into one, and then we subtract 57. All right, final answer is y equals x plus 10 squared minus 57. There it is. All right, two more, but we're going to have some graphs with it. So you guys, you can go ahead and do the huddle. There's 4 problems to do. Part 2, now we're going to graph once we get it from standard to vertex form. All right, we have y equals x squared plus 4x plus 2. Let's use black this time. I'm going to minus 2 on both sides. So nothing different here. Once we have it in vertex form, then we can start plugging numbers into the table and stuff. So we have y minus 2. And then we have x squared plus 4x plus blank. And don't forget to always put the blank on the other side as well. That might be one of the biggest places you would forget how to do anything is put the blanks on both sides. So I assume if you're going to mess up, you'll forget to put the number on both sides. So go off to the side and divide by 2 squared, which is 2 squared, which is 4. You get back up to 4 on both sides. Factor this. 2 times 2 and 2 plus 2. So x plus 2 squared. Put these together, you get y. 4 minus 2 is 2. And then to bring it over, you subtract 2. So y equals x plus 2 squared, a bunch of 2's, minus 2. And so what is the vertex? I'm going to put the vertex right in the middle. The vertex out of here, which you would not be able to get from the original, is negative 2, negative 2. So I'm going to put that right in the middle, negative 2, negative 2. And then so how do you do the rest of this? It's not that hard. You're just going to pick numbers for x and then plug them in for the y. So we know the vertex is negative 2, negative 2. I'm going to pick numbers around negative 2. So if I increase it by 1s, I'm going to go to negative 1, 0. If I go down, I go to negative 3, negative 4. And then I'll just plug in 0 and negative 1, see what we get. So if you plug in 0, you get 0 plus 2 squared minus 2. So that's 2 squared minus 2. So that's 4 minus 2, which is 2. Then plug in negative 1. This is like a little scratch work here, but you could probably do this in your head, hopefully. Negative 1 plus 2 is 1. Square it, you get 1. Minus 2 is negative 1. And I don't know if you remember, but since this is the vertex, these points here are going to be mirror images. So if we know negative 1, this is 2. We have negative 1 here and 2. So now we just have to plot the points. Let's do green. Negative 2, negative 2 is here. Negative 1, negative 1. 0, 2. Negative 3, negative 1. Negative 4, 2. And so this should give us a shape of a parabola. It might be hard to see, but you get the happy face parabola. We have a vertex in there. Everything's good. So you should be able to do this all by hand and not have to use a calculator. Hopefully we could maybe even take a quiz on this without using a calculator at all. All right, last one. And then you have 2 to do as well. All right, we're going to subtract 11. So y minus 11 equals x squared minus 6x plus something over here. Okay, let's go ahead and divide Negative 3 squared is 9. I think we had this before, did we? Close. We had plus 6. This is minus 6 now. Okay, so over here on the left, we get y. 9 minus 11 is negative 2. Oh, we get 2 again. And then if we factor this, this would be x multiplies to 9, adds a negative 6. That would be a minus 3. We get 2 of those squared. And then I'll add 2. Y equals x minus 3 squared plus 2. So the vertex is, remember, change the sign of this one. Put it right in the middle. So we'll do 3, comma 2. The outside one does not get changed. All right, so we can pick 4, 5. We can pick 2, 1. Let's see how this goes. Let's plug in, let's do 4. 4 minus 3 squared plus 2. So that would be 1 squared plus 2, which is 1 plus 2, which is 3. Plug in 5. 5 minus 3 squared plus 2 is 2 squared plus 2, which is 4 plus 2, which is 6. And then we're going to have the same thing on the other side, a 3 and a 6. And once we graph these, we're done. So 3, 2 is your vertex. 3, 2. And then 4, 3. There we go. And 5 is 6. Jumping up quite a bit there. 2 is 3. And 1 is 6. And then draw the parabola. Okay. So that will do it for 6.5, right? And then you have to complete the huddle. But the huddle and then also the second huddle. And that will do it for 6.5.